Forbes India presents Top 30 Talent Leaders of 2023. Powered by Indeed.
It's hard not to feel starstruck. I don't know about you guys, but I definitely feel a little bit of that. And I don't usually feel that, but lovely. So I think today's topic is something that I've heard about over the years from various leaders as well as professionals, wherein everyone talks about the importance of team, correct? And I think we're going to be talking about just that and the importance of recognizing talent and their strengths and sort of leveraging all of that and putting together a wonderful team which can sort of be competitive and efficient. So I'm going to, start right here. Thank you all so much for being here and taking out the time. Obviously, I'm going to start with you, Anil. If we can sort of if you can take us back to the time when you took those 10 wickets at Firozshah Kotla in 1999 against Pakistan, what was going on in your mind then? What was the strategy? And, how supportive were your team members? Too many questions, I know, but really curious.
Thank you, Nanny. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Vinita and Shashi. It's wonderful to be here this evening. Thanks for taking me back to 24 years, possibly a couple of weeks we are ahead. It was 7th of February, 99.
Wow.
We had lost the first test match to Pakistan very narrowly. This was a tour that Pakistan and India were playing in India after about 14 years. So there was a lot of pressure of course, playing Pakistan, and then you had to win against Pakistan. So the first one we lost, and then we moved to Delhi, where you spoke about teamwork. As a bowler, you need runs on the board, and thanks to the batters, we had 420 runs on the board, and that certainly is a cushion when you're bowling, especially in the last innings of a test match. And then, of course, people think that it's one bowler who takes wickets. It's a collective effort. And the pressure, actually, that you build on the batter is what gets you wicket. So it's not just bowling from one end. The person from the other end also needs to keep up the pressure. And that particular day, you sort of come back. You think every game, you sort of think through the same kind of, you do your mental visualization and then go into a game. And it so happened that all the wickets that I took in my mind the previous night exactly happened the same way the next day. It doesn't happen all the time. It's perhaps destiny. And I'm sure everyone remembers after I had got 9 out of 9, that one over that Javagal Srinath bowled was actually the toughest over. Because as a bowler, you're so trained to bowl at the stumps and get people out. Here, he had to bowl slightly wider, not enough wide, because you can't bowl wide, but yet not get a wicket. And that probably is the most challenging. And I think, like you said, it's a team effort in a cricket game. You need fielders to take catches. Then, of course, like I said, the pressure needs to build from the other end. So it was one of those days, perhaps I was destined to get all 10. And it was wonderful to actually beat Pakistan and then level the series. That was the biggest takeaway for me.
Wow, wonderful. You really took us all back in time. Absolutely. And Vinita, I'd like to bring you in here. If you can draw, a parallel from what Anil mentioned in terms of, the achievement that one, or how teams work, in a sports field. What about you as a business leader? How do you share this experience of creating sort of success and building a winning team at the end of the day?
I think I'd just build on what Anil said. Working in an organization is a team sport because no one individual does anything, actually. And similar to high-performance teams in sports, it's important to have a certain rhythm. It's important to understand context. I'm sure, and I don't want to step into territory that I know very little about, but bowling under those circumstances requires a different mindset and a different focus to, a game which is a much easier game. So I think leaders also need to understand context. So understanding context is important, getting the rhythm of your team is important. At the end of the day, it is about people and, their competencies. But I think part of leadership also is about creating an environment where talented people can put up their best performance. Sports teams do it, an orchestra playing does it, companies do it. And I think those companies that actually think about the clarity of the goal, the clarity of the strategy that will get you to the goal, the clarity of putting together the operating system that helps you deliver the strategy, the clarity of who are the players and what are the interdependencies, and above all, at the end of the day, when you deliver, what is in it for me as the team player? So there are, in organizations, of course, performance metrics. In sports, you're the winning team, and it feels very, very different to not being the winning team. But similarly, in the business context, you've got your competitors, and the best athlete wins, whether it is on a sports field or in the business arena. So there are many, many parallels. In fact, the whole thing of alignment, the whole thing of practice, the whole thing of discipline, all those things, we don't use those words in the corporate sector, but those are absolutely critical to delivering a high performance.
Yeah, that's, I think, very well put, Vinita. Coming back to you, Anil, you have been the captain as well as the coach for the Indian cricket team, which means working together with a set of very different individuals. Now, how do you sort of galvanize these very different characters into one cohesive unit and function as a team?
I think taking a cue from what Vinita mentioned in terms of cricket teams, as a captain, it's a lot easier being a captain and being in a leadership role because you're in control on the field. But as a coach, you're trying to put together a strategy and again, trying to create an environment and a culture that not only enables that particular squad, but then people who want to or who are aspiring to be a part of that team understand that, look, they need to do all of these things to be a part of that squad. I think that's very critical. Of course, the captain at that point in time, his views and everything else comes in, and then there is always there's a template that is set in. But as a coach, it's important that you create an environment where everybody can express their views, because in a cricket team, it's not just the captain and the senior players that you need to listen to, because sometimes the best of strategies or best of points that you want to make comes from the youngest players, and you need to create that environment where they don't have the inhibition to come out and speak, and that's what you need. And as a coach, the difference between a captain and the coach is that from a coach's perspective, you're not there for the senior players, you're there for the younger lot, because you're trying to fast track them into understanding the pressure, understanding situations, and how you react, and then how you develop to be able to manage that. Because the last thing that you want as a player when you're playing on the field is to look behind your shoulder and wait for someone to tell you what to do, because that's too late on the field. So you need to create an environment where they can learn, make mistakes, and then learn from those mistakes, and then you don't have a problem if they make new mistakes. And that's what you try and enable in an environment. And because at practice, you try and create that kind of a pressure situation. You can never replicate what happens in the match in a practice session, but you try and create that environment where they're constantly made to train under a pressure situation, so that when they go out there, it's a lot easier to manage and then perform. And it's important that you celebrate those moments, and then identify, not necessarily, I mean, in cricket, we always look at who got 100, who got a 5-wicket haul, and then celebrate them. But then that's not that. It's not just about that. It's also about that little partnership, that one little catch, important run out. Those things matter as well. You need to celebrate that. And then I think as a coach or from a leadership perspective, it's important to identify that and then recognize that in an environment where that particular player feels that, okay, even my smallest little thing that I'm doing, it's coming through. But what I found as a coach versus a captain, the most difficult thing is to tell the 12, 13, 14, 15 player that you're not playing. That's the toughest part. How do you engage them? How do you make sure that their motivation remains and then they're constantly practicing, and then whenever the opportunity arises, they're ready to perform. So that's the difference between that, and it both has its equal challenges, but as a captain, I think you're more in control than a coach.
But how do you tell that player that you're not playing?
You say it, and then you say it, and then you put an arm around the shoulder, and then try and pacify, and then try and explain. It's not easy, but what is important is to have a clear and honest communication. It cannot be something else, and you can't just hold back. It's important to say it, and then also mention that, look, this is probably the area that we are looking at for you to improve on, so that whenever you get the opportunity, you'll be able to perform.
Right. Shashi, I'm going to bring you in right here. Is it similar? Is this also something, that works similarly in a business setting where, how do you balance the need to build a strong team, a cohesive team, whilst also, in this sense, allowing an individual to grow?
I think Anil covered most of it. It's not very different from the sports world.
Right.
I think the first and most important thing is, how do you build a team? A lot of leaders want cohesive teams. Some of them mistake cohesion for uniformity.
Right.
You need a diverse team. You need people who think differently, who are from different cultures, who are from different ways of thinking, are from different circumstances. It's only then you can weave success. As a leader, it's important that you're able to set a very clear, objective vision that everybody understands. It needs to be simple. It needs to be objective. It needs to be understood by everybody. And then you're able to tell everybody what their role is in getting the entire organization to that vision. That's important. 3, like Anil said, feedback. How do you go and tell people that, look, maybe you're not doing the right thing? Provide direct feedback. And also, as a leader, be open to direct feedback. Your team members need to be able to come back to you and say, look, maybe this is how you need to change, or this is what you need to do differently to help us succeed more. Celebrate success, like Anil said. Celebrate small things, success across. And finally, when you do a lot of this, you find a team that sort of is invested in each other. How is it that we can build teams that are as invested in the success of the other person as Javagal Srinath was in that last over invested in Anil's success, right? So that's, I think, what you do to build a cohesive team.
Absolutely. Coming back to you, Anil, what are some challenges that you faced as a captain, and how did you sort of navigate them? And the part 2 of my question would be, in this sense, how did you handle failure? Not just for yourself, but the team, and of course your role as a coach in that sense.
I think in terms of captaincy, it came pretty late in my career. I had probably close to retirement that I got the role to take over as captain. But I was always a leader within the group. Yes, captain, you have a designation there and you are a designated captain. But I've always played that role within the group. And within the leadership group, I was a part of that. And the difficult part was to, sort of, again, like I mentioned, the 12, 13, 14, 15, not easy to manage. And then when things are not going your way, how do you keep the motivation level going? And that's when you depend a lot on the players who've been through those ups and downs. They've been through the roller coaster rides, the legacy of having toured outside of India and not having done well. And then suddenly you start, how do you then change that? It takes a bit of time. The first team that goes out and then wins has been the most resilient. And then the younger lot who come into the team, for them it's a lot easier. So you're trying to create an environment, or trying to create or build teams wherein you've toured before, things have not gone your way, so you want to make that change, And how do you do that? The only way is to, come together as a group. And the first discussion that, I remember having with my senior players was that, look, as individuals, I think we had achieved everything as players. So it was important that we now put all of that behind and looked at how can we now transform this team and create a culture where the core leadership group decides how this team should go about. It's not just about that one particular captain or leader, because at the end of it, if you want the culture to continue, if you want the legacy to continue, if you want performance to continue, it should come from a core group of people. And it should have a buy-in from all the players. There's no point in just standing there and saying, I'm the captain, this is how things have to be done. It doesn't work that way. You need a buy-in from everyone. The only way is to be inclusive and then ensure that they are aware of all of that. So that's one of the main challenges. And then I think in sport, it doesn't require too much of motivation to put in when things have not gone your way. Generally, we sort of sit down and go through failures in depth. We do these 2-3 hour meetings. I mean, in sport, you don't like people sitting in a room and having conversations. But what we don't do enough is when you have actually been successful. You don't try and discuss and understand why and how we actually won this game. We don't really do that exercise. So when we do that, it becomes a lot easier to focus on where things went wrong when actually you've lost a game.
That's a very interesting perspective that you bring in. Vinita, would you like to jump in and probably elaborate a bit on the point that we were talking about earlier, which is the leadership versus leaders bit that, like Anil mentioned as well, he's always been a leader, but not necessarily at that time in a leadership position. How different is it in a corporate setup?
Thanks. I'd like to pick up on 2 or 3 other things that were said. One is about debriefing failure and debriefing success. One of the things certainly in the business world is those companies that consistently perform better than others debrief both failure and success. And I think that's a very important, you might call it a management cadence, a management ritual, a management discipline, that you do it really as a discipline because you can learn as much from your failures as you do from your successes. I think the second point that was a very relevant point was, when Anil, you said you became a captain, quite late, but you were always a leader. And I'd like to distinguish between leaders and leadership because, leadership is really what we're talking about. Leader could be a position, it could be a title. Some people think it's an entitlement, but that's not what we're saying. What we're really saying is your behavior is your leadership. What you do, not what you say. How you act, not what you preach. It is about taking ownership. It is about taking responsibility. It's about taking accountability. It's about feeling responsible for carrying your team with you, irrespective of the situation or the circumstance. And a very important part of being a leader is the ability to have those difficult conversations. In cricket, to tell 12, 13, 14 that you're not going to be playing. But in our world, in the business world, when it comes to performance appraisals and so on, the ability to tell somebody that you're not getting your bonus for this year or you're not getting your merit increase, but let's work on the things that you have to do to be able to get there. I think that maturity is what leadership demands. So it also demands, I think, clarity of thinking, clarity of communication. Authenticity, to my mind, is a very big part of leadership. People, the only way you can be credible with people is to do what you say and say what you do. And people look through it. Like somebody said, your actions speak so loudly, I can't hear your words. So it is about taking on that accountability and responsibility and knowing that there is a collective success. There cannot be individual success. This is not either individual sport or a one-person company. So I think those are some of the things. And, let's not get confused. As a management trainee, I can display great qualities of leadership. And somebody else, as a very senior executive, may not display effective leadership qualities. So it's not about position. It is about what you do and the ownership, responsibility, and accountability you take and how you do it with authenticity.
Wow, wonderful. Shashi, I'd like to bring you in here. We would, when Vinita mentions this point, what about the newer age, talent that's coming up? The Gen Z, the workforce is changing. In that sense, how does the leader change? How does the leader adapt to their behavior in order to ensure that they get the best out of them?
I think younger people across the world are like younger people across generations. I mean, every generation is different from the other, right? When we talk of Gen Z, I think a lot of people are driven by more than just hygiene. They're driven by what the purpose of what they're doing, of the work that they're doing. They want to see how that impacts people around them and the society around them. They want more time for themselves. They are more focused on ensuring that, look, work is not my only defining thing. And they are constantly evaluating companies that people that they would consider joining. Earlier, and this is true not just of joining companies, but it's also about every facet of our life. Earlier, you would buy a television by just looking at a nice ad that's come on your television or on a billboard, or you'd go for a holiday because you saw a nice brochure. Today, people go online and review and read reviews of people who've bought that product or undertaken an experience. And it's similar in people who want to join careers. They are reading about what other people are talking about, the experiences in companies. And that's going to define how companies are able to attract and retain talent. Yeah. Social media is very prevalent. People know that social media is not always very pleasant. Yeah. You get comments, reviews, which are A, not completely honest, and 2, borderline abusive. Yeah. Everybody gets that. So what's important for companies is how they respond to the kind of reviews that they're getting on social media, on other platforms, as they choose to take their voice out to the newer generation.
Interesting. Vinita, in your opinion, how does one build and sustain, rather, a high-performance culture in an organization?
I think if you sort of decode what culture is about norms, patterns, behavior. And I think talking about a high-performance culture, there are several thoughts that come to my mind. One is, what does the organization actually prioritize? Are we seeking excellence, or are we seeking some solution which is a little bit of a patchwork quilt? What are the behaviors we are rewarding? If you want to create a culture which is really oriented to customer care, and you can't have any business without thinking about the customer. Today, even after an Uber ride, you have to rate the performance of your Uber driver. So the thing is that, what are those aspects of culture that get rewarded, that get mentioned, that get ignored? There are many things that companies say, and every company talks about, we value diversity and inclusion and so on. Yeah. And then you actually look at the facts, and the facts say something completely different. I think increasingly what social media is doing is that you can't get away by saying anything. Whatever you say is evaluated, it is discussed openly in forums. It is, opined on. People come to certain conclusions. And therefore, there is even greater need for authenticity and clarity in terms of what are those key components of culture that will get recognized, that will get rewarded, that will get penalized. Because all of those things create the norms that people see and live by. You can't really talk about a high-performance culture and not reward high performance. You can't talk about a high-performance culture and then give everybody merit increases ranging between 7% to 10%. If you're not differentiating between people, then how do those messages get across? And I think those are business issues. Those are not necessarily HR issues. And they have to be addressed holistically. You know, and at the end of the day, the success of any company lies in its people, like the success of any sport lies in the sportsmen and sportswomen who play that sport.
Vinita, coming to you, diversity and inclusion today, you know, are something that are very, very important for an organization. How do you think these contribute to the success of an organization?
You know, obviously these are critical, which is why for a long time we've been talking about them. You know, my own feeling is that there is too much talk and too little action. And when I talk about diversity, I don't just mean gender diversity. I think gender diversity is just seen as a shortcut to talking about diversity. You know, it's diversity of experience, it's diversity of perspective, it's diversity of outcomes. You know, if somebody, right now, I sit on a few global boards, and these are companies who operate in many countries around the world. And unless you actually have a sense of what Africa means to a business in Africa and Latin America means to a business in Latin America, you can't really make a good contribution. I also believe that everybody sitting in this room, and you are the talent seekers for your companies, I think we have to take the big, bold steps and say, how do we create a diverse environment? And get away from these ideas of, you know, we need more women and we need less of somebody else, etc. You know, the example I often use is that if I'm walking in through that door into my place of work, what should you be concerned about? You should be concerned about my track record, my academic qualification, my skills, my knowledge, my attitude, what I have done in my previous roles. Where does my gender or my, you know, now we're talking about LGBT sexual preference, or the country I come from, or the religion I belong to, have anything to do with my ability to contribute in an organization? So I think it's time, starting from all of you in this room, that we say, let's talk about diversity as a competency. It's not a nice to do. It is, we have to do it. And when you start talking about it as a competency, it is something that is endemic and integral to your success. You know, it's like saying, can you play cricket without, you know, a wicket keeper? And you say, okay, anybody can be a wicket keeper. You know, unless you have different skills in a sort of cricket team, or think about an orchestra. You know, can you play Beethoven's Fifth without having the drummers or the violas? You can't. So why do we believe that we can have organizations without certain diverse skill sets? I think it's a very myopic way of looking at business, and I think the sooner we recognize it and the sooner we put real specific metrics to measure what distance we have traveled, it's going to be one of those things which is nice to talk, but not very much happens.
Absolutely. Shashi, what are your thoughts on diversity and inclusion?
So, broadly agree with what Vinita said, but I think we must realize that women's participation in India's workforce is currently at 16%, and that cannot be healthy. And so it's absolutely important and imperative for companies to focus on that, and a lot of other things as well. And really, it's not about diversity and inclusion, it's about diversity, equity and inclusion. That's what companies should focus on. It's important not just as a social goal, it's a business imperative, right? Today, 50%, almost 50% of our population is women. Our sex ratios have become a lot better. So as a company that's looking to serve consumers, if you do not have enough participation from the different types of your consumers in your organization, how do you plan for your consumers? That's very important. How do you ensure that you're building an organization where everybody feels safe? It's not about just about hiring people from different cultures or different kinds of sexual orientation, etc. Can you, if you are able to identify a person who's good to do a job, feel safe in doing the job in a company, irrespective of which religion, which gender, what their sexual orientation is, what their age is. That's absolutely important. That's what companies need to focus on.
I think that's a great learning, and I think this is a great way to end this conversation. Thank you all so much for this super insightful conversation. It was lovely, lovely speaking to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Forbes India presents Top 30 Talent Leaders of 2023. Powered by Indeed.